Good morning. I know it's been a while, but I've been kind of busy, and I had one, and also I haven't got a lot of questions. So, had one of my kids, Mike. Hey, Mike, what's up? Mike sent me a message this morning and wanted to know, what I thought about how the Florida governor is handling the reopening of schools, and wanted to know my opinion on it. So, this is for you, Mike. Um, Ron DeSantis telling Hillsborough or Tampa area schools that they can't be open for online classes only for the first 4 weeks. It kind of reveals a couple of problems with the school system. First of all, why only 4 weeks? Why are you going to say we're going to do online only for 4 weeks? I mean, at the end of last year, we had the schools shut down, and it took a good 3, 4 weeks just to get everybody the technology that they needed. So the idea that you're going to see anything meaningful in the first 4 weeks of this year that you didn't already see in the last 9 weeks of the previous year, it doesn't really make a lot of sense. Plus, it reveals something about school districts, about public education generally, that's a problem, that I think is a larger problem. Why don't the schools already know who did well in distance learning and who didn't? Like, why weren't they tracking that data and making those assessments at the end of last year so that at the beginning of this year, they could say, these are the kids that did not perform well in distance learning, and these are the kids that did fine. Let the kids that had difficulty show up to the brick and mortar schools, and let the kids that performed well on their own continue to work on their own. If they're doing what they need to do and they're capable of independent learning, then why not provide them the opportunity to maximize that skill set, which is a far more valuable skill set to begin with? Check out the links in the comments below this video on YouTube. I'll give you a link to my website for the Gateway Method that focuses on independent learning. I had kids last year that had no problems with independent learning and got noticeably better while they were out of school. So why not let those kids who are already successful continue to do a thing that they have shown success in? You could use it as an incentive. Say in the first 4 weeks, we're going to reevaluate, and anybody that has a C or better in their classes at the brick and mortar school has an option to go to distance learning. And the kids that are struggling stay in school. While the kids that are struggling outside of school, okay, next 4 weeks, you need to start reporting to the school. I mean, why aren't those plans already written up? Why isn't that the data set that they're using to justify their reopening plan? But the other big problem that it reveals is the locus of control for public schools. Why are the schools begging the state for permission? Why are the local school districts having to submit a plan in order for the state to sign off on it? The education of the children should be a local concern. Why are we handing it off to larger and more distant bureaucracies? Why aren't the school districts taking more control of the education of their own kids? And the answer is pretty obvious: money. In the article that I read, it said that the district could go ahead with their plan to go digital only for the first 4 weeks, but they would be giving up state funding. Always follow the money, y'all. Always follow the money. The state pulls on those purse strings, pulls on that little hook, and says, hey, you better do what we tell you. You think the federal government doesn't do the same thing? concentrating power in bureaucracies that are not intimately involved in the decisions in the local community, that's a problem. But a bigger problem is tying money to it so that when you, as a local community, decide, okay, we don't want to live by somebody else's set of rules, you have no choice. You have to be prepared to do without if you want to do on your own. But isn't that kind of what we teach kids when they're growing up at home? My roof, my rules. If you want to make your own rules, you got to move out of the house. But if you want to make your own rules and you got to move out of your house to do it, you have to assume certain responsibilities. If you don't assume the responsibilities, well, then you're not going to be able to live on your own. So here we are. We have school districts and local communities and states that act like spoiled children who pretend to be grown. They act like they've moved out of their parents' house, but their parents are still paying the bills. So the parents get to set the rules. I, for one, think that local communities should be making their own rules and making their own decisions. And the successful communities will attract people moving in. The better the schools are, the more people will want to live in your community. And the more people that are wanting to move into your community, the more successful the community becomes, presumably. DeSantis said that the potential benefits of in-person instruction outweigh health risks. But what if you have a kid that doesn't need in-person instruction? What if you have a kid that is capable of learning on their own? Then you're putting them at risk needlessly and requiring everyone to show up regardless of whether or not they need to be there. That's a one-size-fits-all solution, which bureaucracies are brilliant at. But it's not what individual students really need. You can't tell me that we're trying to differentiate instruction in the schools while we are making the conditions of instruction universal. We're not differentiating how the kids are taught until they show up in the building. That doesn't make a whole lot of sense. How can the state be telling churches you can't open or limiting large gatherings and then forcing 30 kids in a classroom? I'm sorry, but if you've been in a public school classroom, you know social distancing is not going to happen. And we've already seen pictures of hallways in other schools where kids aren't wearing masks and they're packed into the hallways shoulder to shoulder, the same way they've always been. The idea that we're going to be able to social distance with everyone back in the schools that are already overcrowded is insane. You got to be a special kind of stupid to not see the problem with that. And on top of it all, you have Democrats like Janet Cruz and Lori Berman at the State House that are just playing politics. Y'all, you gotta be careful when you have a politician blaming another politician for something that's really not in that politician's control. The problem is too many politicians know that the voters don't pay that close attention, and you're either a D or an R, and depending on how you vote, that determines who you believe. If you vote for Democrats, then you don't believe Republicans. If you vote Republicans, you don't believe Democrats. The result is, because the electorate isn't really paying attention, these politicians can just about say anything they want to and know that their constituents aren't actually going to check up on it because they're predisposed to believe whatever they hear. And that's a problem that education needs to fix, and education isn't fixing. So, Mike, I hope I answered your question. I can't really blame the governor for what he's doing because he's just another cog in the machine. I can't really say that DeSantis is wrong in telling Tampa area schools that they have to open, but At the same time, he is wrong because it shouldn't be a bureaucratic decision to begin with. Oh, and by the way, for anybody in Citrus County, be aware, when you have a politician, when you have a member of the bureaucracy, when you have, say, I don't know, a school superintendent that says we can't actually do effective things in this district because of state and local regulation, that's a cop-out. I'm sorry, but it is. When the superintendent says, I think that would be a good idea, but state regulation precludes it. That's a thing that I would love to do for our children, but we can't because state regulation. Ask that official, what have you done to overcome the regulations? How have you complained about the regulation? Are you petitioning the state or the federal government? Are you writing up a proposal to justify a waiver on that particular piece of legislation? What are you doing to enact those policies that you think would be effective and getting around the regulation, not circumventing the regulation, but seeking waivers, seeking exceptions, making an argument to the people who control the regulatory system? We have handed over, we've given up too much of our control to bureaucracies without realizing the danger inherent in bureaucracies. And until we get some people in leadership that understand it's not about the bureaucracy, it's about the kids, it's about the system, it's about fixing a broken system. Until we get people in leadership that understand that it's not about the bureaucracy, until we get people in leadership at the local level, at the superintendent's level, that recognize that the bureaucracy is the problem, we're going to keep having these issues. We're going to keep having these debates, and we're going to keep underserving our kids. Mike, you know where I stand on this, and you know what I've said about this. You need to worry about you. Don't depend on the teacher telling you what you need to know and how you need to learn it. Get a book, take your note, get a book, mark a text, take the notes, and teach yourself as much as you're able. Use the teacher as a resource, not as a source. Hope that was helpful. I'm the Mister, and I'm just trying to help.